Facebook's most valuable asset is how well it knows you. Last year, Facebook made 98% of its revenue on advertising. That's $39.9 billion.
Yeah, what got you interested in machine learning in the first place?
I started finding actually pretty cool, like the capabilities of ML, like that actually can solve, pretty complex problems.
So what do you do at Meta?
My job title is called research scientist.
So how many rungs on the corporate ladder are there between you and Zuckerberg?
Probably like 9 or 10.
Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Tsutomu Akano, a research scientist at Meta. Tsutomu and I did our PhDs together at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign.
Yeah, so what do you do at Meta?
My job title is called research scientist, but it's what I actually do is like machine learning engineering. So my team is it's called like ads ranking. So basically we push ads to users, but the value that we're actually trying to maximize is like for both users and advertisers. So we train models that rank ads for users based on what advertisers publish on our platform. And I guess because Meta makes essentially most of its revenue from these ads, it's a pretty important area in our company. And recently there's been like increased scrutiny on privacy, right? So companies like Apple or like governments, even at government level, like say like EU level, right? There's more scrutiny on like what private companies can use for their advertisements, what sort of data they can use for advertisements. So we have to come up with more clever techniques to try to learn, to try to train these models from more limited set of data. So so problems like that are the ones that our team is trying to solve, I guess.
Cool. You kind of mentioned you use algorithms. Which algorithms, like at the most basic level?
So there's this thing called like differential privacy. It's been a thing since originally, I think from like the 60s or 70s, but nobody really paid attention on it too much until the recent years, at least in terms of like implementing it at a wide industry level. So we have some, we try to use these sort of more theoretical tools as well to mitigate the loss in the training data quality. I don't know how much I can go into depth about it, but we try a whole bunch of different things. It's not just we just do neural networks and just hope something works. So there's actually some interesting work involved.
Interesting. Differential privacy, like are there any like kind of better known algorithms that this is kind of closely related to?
Well, I mean, differential privacy is like a scheme to learn meaningful data. Like it gives you like some sort of theoretical bounds on what you can learn when you segment data, like when you put them in groups and you only know like aggregate data, for example. Like these sorts of like knowing these sorts of theoretical bounds would help us, come up with better metrics or like evaluation techniques. So it's used in those ways, I guess.
Oh, okay. So it's more like a framework of like how to approach these type of problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it started off as like a very broad framework to like answer these kinds of, I don't know, kind of like information theoretic problems, I guess maybe. But in the end, we can sort of leverage these sort of theory to come up with useful metrics. Yeah.
No, interesting. Yeah, coming up with useful metrics is always
that's very important. Yeah.
Suppose you're in like crunch time at Meta. Like, what does like a typical workday look for you?
I mean, crunch time is pretty intense. At least for me, last year. Basically, every quarter there's like some sort of crunch time, and to be honest, I was pretty stressed around those times. They last about maybe 2 weeks, and probably each week I don't know exactly what number of hours I work, but probably like 60 plus. So And on average, I would say, it can be managed around 40 hours a week. So it is more like I have to work on the weekends and things. It does happen. But yeah, it doesn't last too long. And I think it's also due to the fact that I was a noob because I joined, only a year and a half ago. So I wasn't managing my like time and projects very well. So I think that contributed to that. I feel like things can be better this year, but yeah, it is stressful. Like even the more senior people have expressed to me that like it can be pretty stressful.
No, fair enough. I guess like, so in those long work days, I mean, if you're working 60 hours a week, that's like quite a bit of time a day. Like how does like a typical day break down in terms of like, what you're actually doing?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a machine learning engineer, I have to run a lot of experiments. So I have to keep track of like what experiments are running because these things can take, days, right? So I have to, make sure that these things are running okay, like they didn't get stuck or they didn't fail due to some errors. And it happens that, they do fail occasionally. So when that happens, I have to go and debug. Okay, so maybe this pipeline got stuck. Maybe there's something wrong with the machines that it got distributed to. And, I would have to communicate with a whole bunch of people to try to resolve these things. So it's pretty busy during the day in terms of like communication. And, there's like meetings to keep track of, whatever, right? So, and in the evenings, I just do more of like residual work. So, more maintenance, more like pipeline writing. Yeah, it's a lot of like maintenance kind of work for experiments, I would say.
Gotcha. So like with all your work like maintaining these experiments and debugging, did you like take away any like useful principles just like as a general like machine learning practitioner?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's just machine learning practitioner, but as just like, engineering science principles, maybe I learned a lot because, I'm coming from like a math background, right? And in pure math, there's no experiment. Like you try out some things and, but like you try to like work out some things, but that's not really like experiment. So I feel like I learned more of like how to actually run experiment as like a scientist. But for machine learning specific learnings, yeah, just being like very precise helps about like what sort of data you're using, how you're setting up the experiments, what metrics you're looking for, because yeah, it helps to be very strict and keep track of these things. And when you launch experiments, I found personally that it helps to launch as many variants as possible. Like that always gives you a bit more information. Yeah, instead of like running, like because it takes time, right? So you do like first round, and you look at the results. You have some hypotheses, and then you do the second round. But sometimes it just helps to launch everything at once. Yeah.
Gotcha. So maybe try to launch a few different experiments at once when you're at a larger scale and it takes longer to figure out.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, especially when these experiments can take more than like a week to finish. Yeah.
Makes sense. I guess if you have the compute. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, this is provided that you have the resources to do this. But yeah, if you're working in a company and aren't too limited in terms of that, then yeah.
So then, okay, taking a step back. So you mentioned you learned some engineering science principles. Okay, so what would your biggest takeaway be?
Yeah, probably like just keeping track of everything and focusing more on like what the metrics are, because I feel like those are things that as a math person, like, of course I knew in principle that I should be doing this, but I didn't really like do it, right? Like if I wanted to look at something that I've written down, I just go back in my notebook or something. And there's not really many metrics in math other than does this proof work or not? So yeah, these are some new things that I had to get used to. I think I've improved. I think my mentality towards this has definitely changed since I started working.
So when you're talking about metrics, do you mean like just making sure you adhere to the metric that's in place, or like actually like continuously like reevaluating whether your metric is what you want?
Yeah, or the second one. So actually, checking that these metrics are actually saying what they're supposed to be saying, or like going through all of your hypotheses again to make sure that you didn't miss out on anything easy. Or it's just, I don't know. I feel like people who came from more like experimental sciences probably find this much easier. But yeah, these are things that I kind of had to adjust and pick up from scratch.
Yeah, what got you interested in machine learning in the first place?
So in the first place, it kind of started out purely as like a exit strategy from academia. So, I heard from multiple people that you should probably have something to fall back onto in case academia doesn't work out, or in case you just choose not to go into academia. And, I also heard from people that, things like data science or machine learning are in demand. And it's probably not, and I figured it's probably not too hard to pick up because I do have some computer science background from undergrad. And given that now, I'm pretty comfortable with math, like I felt like, okay, maybe I should be able to pick this up pretty easily. So, I started taking like the Andrew Ng, like Intro to ML, that kind of stuff. And I started reading more about ML, watching YouTube videos or whatever. And yeah, I don't know, I started finding it actually pretty cool, like the capabilities of ML, like actually can solve, pretty complex problems that humans might have trouble doing, and you can do it very fast, and it's often very scalable. So I realized that, okay, well, this is actually pretty cool, and actually has some like impact at like humanity scale, right? So this means that there's probably like opportunities in industry to actually go and make money. Yeah, I just kind of got dragged in from there, I guess. So yeah, I probably spent like a year just trying out various like tutorials. Like Google has some like notebooks they can play around with, or there's all these like sort of lecture series on YouTube that you can watch. I also started reading like the ML papers that came out in the recent years, just to try to get a feel of like what people are working on.
Eventually, you have to do an interview at Meta. So I guess could you remember anything from that experience, like what it was like, or what type of questions they asked, or that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I got into I interviewed for the intern position first, right? And that's how I got into Meta. So the intern interview process is one round of it's actually 2 rounds, I guess. So meaning, 2 different people interview you for coding. So that's a coding screener. And then after that, there's a team matching interview. And then once you pass both of those, then you get an offer. So for the first coding screener, it was pretty easy. They probably asked about like lead code, easy kind of problems, because, it's just like a screener and it's for interns. So I kind of doubted that they would even ask like medium hard questions. So I only prepared for like easy to medium and had about 3 weeks to prepare. So I just solved a whole bunch of stuff, maybe, I don't know, like 40, 50 problems total. Just trying to remember like, all sorts of data structures, basic algorithms, things like that. And in the end, it was not too bad. So yeah, there were 2 rounds. Each round, there were 2 questions, 2 or 3 questions. And yeah, I did. I wasn't too worried about it because I thought I did okay. And yeah, I passed at the end. But the second round, the team matching one, that was more ML specific. So they would ask you about what kind of projects you worked on, or like what kind of knowledge, like domain expertise you might have for ML. So I was more concerned about that. in terms of preparation, I just started reading more papers about recommendation systems, because before that, like I was reading ML papers, but they're mostly like academic oriented, I guess, or these tasks that they were solving in these papers might not be like immediately applicable to these companies like Meta, Facebook back then. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I should learn something about ranking or like recommendation. So, I only had like 2 or 3 weeks to prepare, but I tried my best to sort of learn various techniques in more like direct industry domains. And I also did a little bit of studying for like ML system design. So, like how to serve ML services at scale, things like that. Again, it was only 2 to 3 weeks, so like I didn't, retain too much of that knowledge in the end, but I think it helped a little bit. But actually, in the end, I think what got me the position was more like communication skills. Like, so how the team matching interview went was I talked to 3 people, like 3 engineers from 3 different teams, about 45 minutes each. And I kind of thought I wasn't doing too well on the first 2 rounds of that, because, like it was pretty normal, right? Normal things, like they would ask you what you're doing, what are you interested in, and then you have some conversations, right? And one of the person gave me like some, like actual like ML system design question, and I didn't do that well, I felt. So I was kind of getting discouraged in the middle. But in the very last round, I had a really good experience. Like I had a very good conversation with the interviewer. And I felt like I was able to explain the things that I was interested in. And I felt like I was asking, like the right questions about the things that he worked on and he was explaining. And overall, I felt like I was doing pretty well. And and I think in the end, I ended up doing the internship with the team that the last interviewer was from, just because I had like a good experience, like talking to this person. So and I think that helped. So overall preparation, they don't give you too much time, right? Especially if you're not coming from like ML grad school program or so, right? Like, because you're not doing ML in your day-to-day life, so you might be more out of shape. But I think it's possible to go through these interviews as someone who, with if you have a little bit of prior knowledge about how to go through like these kinds of interviews. I think it's definitely possible to prepare.
I guess the natural next question. So first, I guess you mentioned Easy LeetCode, which is you have to do that basically for all the interviews. And then the second thing you mentioned, the ML portion, which had some systems design and presumably some other type questions, as well as maybe just like conversations with team members.
Right.
Do you have any resources that might help you prepare for like the more standardized one, or did you kind of just,
I didn't. I don't think I used any like standardized resource. I didn't know what I was doing, to be honest, when I was preparing for the interviews, because So first of all, I only interviewed with Facebook for tech interviews. Like I was trying to get internships in that semester for the next year, and I actually applied to a lot of like finance companies for like quant positions. I applied to maybe like 5 or 6, but it's not a lot, but like majority of them were like those positions. And in the end, like I didn't really do that well for those, because they kept asking me these like puzzle type questions, and I got stuck on them because it was weird. I couldn't think like fast enough for those kinds of puzzle problems. And I only applied to Facebook because a recruiter reached out, and there really wasn't enough time for me to prepare for these things. So, and I didn't know what I was doing. So I think like looking back, my preparations were pretty bad. Like at that time, I thought I was like doing my best by, like reading these ML design articles, or like, watching these lecture videos about about like recommendation systems or whatever. But yeah, there's probably much better ways to prepare. So how I prepared might not be very helpful to more people. And I think, this was like just 3 years ago, but I think nowadays there's even more resources on how to prepare for like these ML interviews. So yeah, I would highly recommend leveraging those instead of taking my word for it.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So you mentioned you study recommendation systems. Do you use any of that stuff you studied in your day to day?
Not really, to be honest. Well, I mean, like I wasn't expecting to. I just felt like I needed to have something to like talk about in these interviews, saying that, I did look into this kind of stuff. I know a little bit about these kinds of stuff. So that was my strategy. Yeah, I think like the hot thing, or maybe it wasn't like the super hot thing, but like the thing that people were talking about was like this like matrix factorization algorithms. It came from like the Netflix challenge. So, and I thought that was actually pretty cool. So I learned a little bit about that.
Like the filtering, that kind of thing?
Yeah. And yeah, what else did I learn? I don't even remember what I learned. Like it's that level. Like it was such a thin layer of knowledge that I was trying to apply to myself.
Well, I think a lot of people will find that good to hear that, you can get lucky sometimes.
Yeah. And overall, I think this whole thing, I was lucky because, the year after that COVID started, right? And then a lot of places stopped hiring even interns.
So how many rungs on the corporate ladder are there between you and Zuckerberg?
Probably like 9 or 10. I think. Yeah, I think something like that. It's pretty. Distance is pretty big. Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like 9 or 10. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's to put things in perspective.
Yeah, because even after the layoffs, we still have like 70,000 full-time employees or something like that. So yeah, it's big.
Speaking of the layoffs, can you share your experience at all about that?
I was hearing from my friends about these rumors, right, about potential layoffs coming up. And I think I started hearing these rumors maybe 2 months before it actually happened. And then like as it actually got closer to the date, more and more like, substantial rumors started coming out. So I was like, oh, it's gonna come. And it actually came finally. I think something like New York Times launched an article on like Sunday afternoon or something, and then the following Wednesday it was confirmed, like finally by the company or something like that. So there were like 2 days where people were very, very stressed, I think. And yeah, I felt pretty uncertain as well. Like on one hand, because I'm working in the ads team, which is a pretty like business critical area. And I, like at least from what I thought, like I thought I was performing okay. So I wasn't too worried, but there's still that concern, right? And a lot of my colleagues, like they're on visas and they're on H-1B visas and they're very, very stressed, right? They must be very scared to lose their jobs. So I think overall the stress levels in the company was pretty high. But in the end, I didn't get laid off. And actually none of my team members were affected by this layoff. Yeah, I think they deliberately made it very vague to find out the criterion for the layoffs. I think it's like some like legal strategy thing. Yeah. So it's not like just performance based or anything like that. Yeah, but in the end, like we didn't really end up getting affected at all. Like the people that I collaborate with at work, none of them were laid off. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's still very uncertain times, right? Because very recently, Google and Amazon also did their layoffs at a similar scale of more than 10,000 people. So yeah, I don't know, like I'm not like an economics expert to know what this means, but yeah, it does seem scary. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
Still.
people at least claim they're economics experts and haven't why all these layoffs occur.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the most reasonable one is that I think companies were kind of overhiring during the pandemic, and now they have to kind of cut back.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, at least for Meta, I think the company like really grew a lot from like around 2017 or 2018. They hired so many people, and we were like on the verge of crossing like the 100,000 employee line. They were hiring super aggressively during the COVID times. Even places like Amazon, right? Like they're sending out crazy offers, and it was so easy to bump up your pay by like 70-80% by switching companies. Like it was kind of insane. So yeah, so on the other hand, yeah, it does make sense that this sort of like restructuring of companies does happen. Yeah.
I think I see someone explain how the layoffs work. So basically you have the CEO at the top, and then you have a bunch of like people right under him. And, some of the branches will be completely untouched, like, mission critical portions of the company. Some will be completely axed off, completely fired. And then there'll be some in the middle where you have to like, do some performance thing. And then, basically it kind of repeat. So then, each one of the, children of the CEO, or like the ones right under the CEO, they have to do the same process as if they were the CEO.
Yeah, I think I have heard of like the entire teams or projects getting canceled, and either everybody got fired or they were told to find other roles in the company.
Can you think of like who got fired more than others in terms of the company? Like what were the distribution of the?
I don't know the distribution, but I heard that the recruiters got hit pretty hard, which makes sense, right? Because there was hiring freeze for a while. There is still a hiring freeze, as far as I know, I think, like even across the industry. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that they got laid off. And I think, as you said, like the non-business critical or like mission critical teams probably got impacted a lot more than others. But in terms of, I don't know enough people internally, and I don't know about their performance enough to say like who got axed just because of their performance. Yeah, but it seems like that's not, just because you were a low performer, you were let go. Also, like people that were expensive to the company would be let go, right? I think like a lot of these engineers who got really crazy offers, or they're kind of high level, and the company has to give them a lot of compensation. I think some of them were maybe targeted as well. I don't know.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on the metaverse? Everyone.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm not really involved in that stuff. Like neither at the company nor personally. Like I don't own like Oculus or whatever. But I don't know. Like I feel somewhat optimistic about it. Like I think as we make more progress in these like native technologies, like facial recognition, or like emotion tracking, eye tracking, and like 3D like projection, or like AR VR technologies. I feel like these things are happening at a pretty fast pace, the progress, and yeah, it's a shame because I feel like Meta doesn't do a very good job of like advertising these progress very well, right? Like like the meme with like the really kind of badly made avatars, and people think that's the metaverse, and I don't know. I think I feel like it's kind of giving like the wrong impression. But I don't know. I think people are expecting it. We're expecting it to be something that's like released within like 2 years, but that's not really the vision. I think it's something that Meta plans to work on for kind of a long time, at the scale of like, more than 10 years, 20 years, to like lay the foundation. And, I might not be with the company for that long, but yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to share a little bit of insights about Meta. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.